Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow Season 10. It's been 10 seasons of identifying and celebrating small businesses such as yourself. I'm Sunanda Jayasseelan, and speaking of success stories in small businesses, tonight on the show joining us is someone who is an example of what it takes to be an entrepreneur and is a success story and celebrating really entrepreneurship here in the country. Dinesh Agarwal, founder CEO of IndiaMART, joining me on the show tonight. I also have someone who is very closely associated with the startup ecosystem, Dhruv Nath. He's a well-known author. He also mentors startups. Both of these gentlemen joining me to talk about the current state of startups and the startup ecosystem in the country, their view on valuations, and also what they feel are going to be some of the things that are key changers and drivers for this ecosystem. Gentlemen, such a pleasure having both of you here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, talking to our small businesses about all of the issues that are, closest to your heart and to mine as well, talking entrepreneurship, talking funding, and we're going to, of course, discuss some of the topics in your latest book, Dhruv. Before we come to all of that, I want to really talk about what does entrepreneurship mean. We have one of India's best-known entrepreneurs here joining us today, so thanks for taking the time, Dinesh.
Thank you.
A lot of entrepreneurs that we speak with say they're accidental entrepreneurs. They say if we knew what was the size of the challenge, we'd have never become entrepreneurs. What is the highlight of your entrepreneurial journey been?
So I think when I was in US and saw this internet, birth of internet, literally the birth of internet, and I was always fascinated towards small business coming from a small business family, as well as the computers. I think the trio kind of said ki I need to go back to India, I need to do something for a small business, and I need to do something within internet. So that was the kind of decided moment. And 15th August 1995, Prime Minister announced the internet arrival in India, and the very next day I said to my manager that I'm going back to India. Okay. So when I came back, I was only with these three legs that I need to do business, I need to do business in India, and I need to do business with the internet for SMEs. But rest we didn't know. We didn't really know what exactly we wanted to do. So I think every year folded on, and we found something interesting. Since the problem itself was interesting, the space itself was interesting, that kept me going.
Sure.
So I would not call it as if I had a challenge predefined in the beginning, or I had a target predefined in the beginning, but it's just that I kept loving what I was doing, and it had some or the other positive impact on all three of us.
Dhruv, you've worn many hats,
Yes.
but all, working closely with entrepreneurs and small business. So my question is, what about being a mentor to small business excites you the most?
So I have been a professor with MDI, and I was a professor for about 19 years. And I used to spend a lot of time with my students who had either they were planning to create a startup or they had created a startup. And we used to sit and have long chats. And I found that very, very fascinating, extremely fascinating, because I learned a lot from them. Hopefully they learned something from me. And whatever I learned from them, I would pass on to the other young founders that I would spend time with. So I found this to be extremely satisfying. I in fact also became an angel investor as well as mentor. So that's where it started, and it's great fun.
Okay, we've used the word startup now many times in just the few minutes that we've been shooting. So let's talk about that. And I know both of you have very strong views when it comes to perhaps how the word startup, or the definition of startup, and how it is coined. And Dinesh, you would go so far as to say it's skewed. Why do you feel that? What are perhaps some of the inherent advantages, disadvantages associated with that term?
I think it goes back a little bit in my thinking. You know, traditionally I came from a small business family, and I thought everybody was doing business, you know, and business is tough and business is great to be done. But then when I came into this tech business, the new word came entrepreneurship. You know, I was very new to the word entrepreneur. I still can't find the difference between the two, businessman and entrepreneur. And then
So
this
why are
new
they interchangeable? They are interchangeable.
they
right?
are interchangeable. I think they are just the synonym of each other,
Yeah, absolutely.
but they are used as if one is very elite and the other is very. Then this new definition, maybe 10 years later, I know in my days it was not being called a startup. You know, suddenly there is a startup as a word came in, and then the startup is people define startup as if everybody is looking at elephant from their own angles, and then there is a startup registration to recognize you as a startup, which says innovation. Which business is not innovative, or which business doesn't have everyday change in processes, or which businessman or which farmer doesn't have a vision. So I think everybody had a vision. It's just the positioning yourself. Earlier probably businessman was glamorous enough, then the word that became overused, so people brought entrepreneurship, and now startup. MSME is a proper definition. Private limited company, proprietorship firm, partnership firm is a proper definition. But startup definition or startup recognition is more skewed towards tech businesses. I think a lot is changing now. Over the last 5-10 years, I have seen so many traditional businesses, cosmetic making companies, water making companies, they are being recognized as a startup. Food delivery companies are being recognized as startups. So these are nothing but old traditional businesses using some part of the technology here and there, and it is the big mindset change between the traditional business owners or entrepreneurs, what I used to call them, which was not open to equity based partnership earlier, and now they are open to equity based partnership. VCs were always trying to find more visionary entrepreneurs, more missionary entrepreneurs or businessmen, and they will continue to find even now. So I would say that let's not confuse a startup or an entrepreneurship with a tech only or with a asset light only.
Sure. On season 10 of the show, we highlight all the things that our experts are calling out by way of trends, events, entrepreneurs or small businesses. Tonight on the show, we're talking about the power of the internet for small businesses and the power of positioning and what difference it can make in the life of an entrepreneur. Listen in. You used one word that I want to pick up on, and you said positioning. What is holding traditional businesses from positioning themselves perhaps differently? You were talking funding, and this is to you also, Dhruv, and we will talk about your book. What is holding these businesses from positioning themselves differently?
So earlier, in the pre-reform era of 1990s, businesses traditionally did not want to position themselves as glamorous because of certain issues. We don't want to come in the lights of certain sectors of the government or the Inspector Raj or things like that. So people would traditionally say that, okay, let's keep it within the family, let's keep it like this. Things started to change. These tech businesses, they had nothing to lose. They came out with a very different mindset, and they proved that taking external capital at an early stage and at a right stage can create lot more value than only the profit and loss account, and it can create a lot more wealth.
Sure.
Now that piece is being recognized even by the traditional businesses.
Sure.
So I think things are changing. That positioning now matters, and it's a changed word. Pre-90s versus pre-2020s, post-2020s is a very different word.
Sure. I'll have to take a quick commercial break on that note. For those of you watching at home, don't go anywhere. We're back in just a moment. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. And tonight, a very exclusive conversation with someone who needs no introduction. He's a very well-known entrepreneur, the founder and CEO of IndiaMART. I also have well-known author and mentor, Dhruv Nath. You were talking equity, so let's talk about your book. The title of your book is Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares?
Yes, absolutely.
So is funding then the number one nightmare, the number one challenge for an entrepreneur today?
It's one of the biggest,
One of
undoubtedly.
the biggest, okay.
So, first of all, creating something where you are unique is a challenge, because if you have something which is not unique, where you're doing something that everybody else is doing, you don't grow, because then you're competing with people who are all doing exactly the same thing. A, you don't grow. B, you will not get investor funding because they want something which is unique where you have an entry barrier, right? So that's one. Secondly, what is very, very important is how do you make these startups scalable, right? And I'll explain why that is so important.
Yeah.
Because if you look at, I'm talking of the investor right now, since you asked me that question. If you look at a typical investor, if he wants to make, let's say, 15 to 20% return per year, the stock market is good enough as long as you're invested for a long period, right? What they want from a startup is, if they put in money, they want far higher returns, right? And that kind of return will only come if you're dramatically scalable, right? So scaling up your business dramatically, scaling up your business fast is another major issue that entrepreneurs face. Coming to funding, yes, it is one of the biggest issues, and in fact in today's times it's become a little tougher, because of the US inflation and the interest rate hardening and so on and so forth. But this is a cyclical process. So I would imagine in a few months from now, hopefully things will come back to normal and funding will once again be available.
Okay.
But the one message I want to leave with young founders is, funding is not the goal. Funding is, if you need it, a means to achieve your goal. And your goal is running a business. Unfortunately, a lot of young founders say, boss, I've got $1 million of funding at this kind of valuation, and they brag about it. That's not the goal. Right? The goal is running a business which hopefully at some stage becomes profitable. If you do that, funding, if you require it, will come. So it's not the goal. But yes, it is one of the biggest challenges.
So I want to ask you the funding question, and you were talking about the fact that a lot of traditional businesses are moving away from so-called traditional funding methods, are open to PE, open to VC, etc. How about tapping the capital markets as a source of funding? And you've done that and done it very successfully. What's it going to take for India's traditional businesses to look more and more at the capital markets?
So if you look at Indian capital markets, 99% of it is held up by traditional businesses only.
Yeah.
Whether it is all kind
Oil
of
and
manufacturing
gas,
businesses, all kind of financial services business. It is only now, in the last decade or so, starting from Naukri.com, some 10, 15 odd companies from the tech world internet world have started to get listed. Now coming to your second question on the small businesses tapping equity funding using a exchange based platform. I think NSE and BSE have been putting a lot of effort towards that in creating SME stock exchange. I remember even 20 years ago OTCI was created. It has not taken off very well. Why? Because the first step to learning equity financing is VC funding, private equity funding. If that doesn't happen 100x bigger in traditional businesses of manufacturing, in traditional businesses of trading, service providing, very few of them will be able to make it to the listed space.
Yeah.
It's like priming up the business for getting ready for listing. Otherwise, as a private business, suddenly you become a listed business.
Yeah.
Most of the time, people are not able to handle the complete change. Even for IndiaMART, we have been 10 years. We have been a private equity and venture capital funded company, and which primed us as to what is important, what is corporate governance, how to do quarterly board meetings, how to maintain MIS, and then what kind of legal implications are there, which makes it easier for you to adopt to a listed company and listed company norms of disclosure. Most people are not very comfortable with that kind of disclosure. So as I mentioned in my previous answer, it is very, very important that now this new age capital, which is the venture capital, angel capital, private equity capital, is gone to the traditional businesses like manufacturing, wholesaling and retailing, and they should be given an equal footage or equal power to create valuable companies, which will be the good thing for the MSMEs of India.
Sure.
Can I just add something to that? See, you spoke about listing, right? Publicly listed companies. I will just look at two categories of investors, and they're very different in their behavior. One is the private guys, which means the angel investors, the VCs, right? Two is the investor who invests in the stock market, right? The person who invests in the stock market expects profitable companies, and he expects that profit to keep growing. He or she expects that profit to keep growing year on year, and he will use benchmarks like price to earnings ratio, price to book, and so on, right? And that's what he expects. Whereas if you look at the angel investor or the VC, he does not expect profits today. What he expects is solid amount of growth, much faster growth than you would get on most listed companies in the stock market. And he's okay with a loss provided there is a path to what I call profitability, right? Now, if you look at founders of startups, right, young startups, 1, 2, 3, 5 years old, typically they are in this position where they are not profitable and they're growing dramatically, right? If these guys were to list, right, they will flounder on the stock market because they don't have profits, right? There is no there's no earnings, so there's no price to earnings. So which is one more reason why, I'll just add to what Dinesh said, one more reason why startups, particularly early stage startups, look at funding from angels, from VCs, basically private funding, rather than listing.
Why are there so few profitable companies? What is your secret, sort of mantra, and what is that secret sauce that you have to ensure that you're remaining profitable?
So I think we started early on, and in those days, making these kind of losses to acquire large market share wasn't seen as glamorous, because the path to profitability is basically the time given by investors' appetite to risk. We typically took a 3-year view of the business. Even if we invested heavily, we always thought that by the third year of the investment, we should become at least break even. However, now people take a 5-year or a 7-year view, and in those 7 years, anything can go wrong externally, geopolitically, or even your entire thought process can go wrong. So I think today, given that a lot of such investments have gone into technology, and technology has taken leapfrog because of the smartphone or mobile computer, or what I call, suddenly the computer or a smart computing penetration has gone 10x from being 10% of the population to almost being 100% of the population in the next couple of years. Now that computing power has gone to the hands of everybody, I think the market has become humongous, and that is why people are willing to take disproportionate risk on the startups with a 5, 7, 10-year view of pumping in money. And that is why you are seeing the losses being mounting. I'm sure as this penetration reaches almost saturation over the next 2-3 years or so, again people will start to look at a 3-year to 5-year view of investment versus profitability. It is just that since the internet adoption and the mobile phone adoption was going through the roof, people were always seeing that there was an expanding market.
Gentlemen, I'm so happy that we could manage to squeeze out this little bit of time in both of your calendars, and both of you are very busy, but thank you so much for giving us the time and speaking with us here and speaking straight from the heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That was part 1 of our conversation with Dinesh Agarwal of IndiaMART and Dhruv Nath, author and mentor. Coming up on part 2, we will be taking live viewer queries, which our experts will answer. Stay tuned.